Hello there. Time for another one of these practice videos. Just walking down here trying to think of some ideas of what to talk about today. Once again back in the woods because it's where I think best. Sound of the river always helps me a bit while I'm getting used to this stuff. Anyway, I've been doing, not surprisingly for an unemployed, just finished student, been doing lots and lots of job applications lately. And that combined with the fact that most of my work in recent years has been about education, got me thinking a lot about the job market and skills. Now there's the crossover there is that a lot of the private education companies are all focused on this idea of like learning and development at the moment. And within that, within higher education leadership, there's always this talk at the moment about the shift to skills, as if it wasn't something that people valued before. It's always puzzled me a little bit. But recently I've been thinking about how what that seems to mean in practice is this constant compulsion to package education into smaller and smaller chunks, which in theory isn't bad. You know, if you're always having to learn new skills, being able to learn them quickly is super important. But in their current form, these sort of micro-credentials current form, the aim is just how little effort, as far as I can see, how little effort can you put into creating something that is supposedly some kind of qualification. You see this a lot in what they call MOOCs, these massively online learning platforms, where, like, in principle, they should be brilliant. Like, there's this idea of democratizing education, which is super important, and in some places that's really valuable. But when it comes to jobs, there's a lot of rubbish out there. It's like I log into LinkedIn basically every day at the moment, and every day there's always a swarm of people celebrating their latest micro credential, and I don't want to laugh at their achievements because, you know, every little bit of learning is a brilliant thing, but it's just knowing that they're not as great as they seem. And like when that comes into the actual application process, you know, the reason you're able to sell these is because they must have some kind of effect. It must pull in recruiters somehow, having all of these qualifications. And I know from personal experience that one of the reasons I've struggled to get into journalism is because I don't have a journalist qualification, even if I've learned the majority of things that I would need to pass that qualification. It's a little bit hard to say for certain because it's kind of a bit of a black box. It's very hard to get information about exactly what the curriculum is. So I can get a loose idea of what happens, but not the exact thing. But yeah, these credentials, that seems to be what all of these L&D types mean when they talk about the need to shift to skills. But I'm actually not convinced that it's the right way. The argument of why these are so important is that with the workplace becoming increasingly more technical, you need to be able to prove that you're actually able to use some of these more technical elements of the workplace. But at the same time, the same commentators talk about how fast moving work is, how technology is moving so fast that your skills can be out of date within a couple of years. And the argument is, okay, well, use our micro-credentials to keep on reskilling. But I feel that it's missing the point. Now, like when it comes to actually getting onto job boards, you'll see requirements that say, oh, you need to have blah, blah, many years of experience in some kind of technology that often hasn't existed for that length of time. You know, like programming languages that were invented the year before, and the recruiter wants 2 or 3 years of experience in it. This is just something that comes up all the time. It's just silly. But What you really need is a mindset shift. The way that education works needs to be less about the specific skills and instead developing the ability to learn very, very quickly. That way you don't need to reskill all the time. That's bad news for the L&D people who are wanting to get you reskilling all the time, because that's their profit margin there. They need you to keep on using those. They need to keep on using their resources, because that's how they make money. But in terms of recruiters, in terms of individuals, surely it would be much, much more valuable to the workplace as a whole, the work environment, if more emphasis was put on teaching people how to learn so they reskill themselves. And within the workplace itself, allotting more and more time to retraining. It doesn't need to be in the name of retraining, though. It can just simply be learning, studying, practicing. And that way you no longer need to worry about the technologies, like the technological skills running out, per se, because you're always, like, your team is always developing. But that's not something that seems to be able to be monetized. It's a mindset shift. So I think this story about how the future is in skills, it's actually rubbish. What's really much more important is to develop people with a very wide interest base and the ability to think, because otherwise everyone loses out, really, other than the learning and development teams who want to sell you their subpar education platforms. Sorry, L&D types, you've got a long way to go before they're really, really valuable. So that's my thought for today. Yeah.